Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today on the benefits of a unified platform. So just to get us started, I'm just going to start with some introductions. So my name is Kaitlyn Townsley, and I am the Associate Director of Product Innovation here at Axiom. And with me, I have Maliha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maliha Haider. I'm the Director of Data Management and Data Analytics at Axiom.
And today we'll be walking through the benefits of an eClinical platform. So just a little bit of background information about Axiom so you know where we're coming from a little bit. So we worked on over 700 different clinical trials, with our largest randomized trial being about 40,000 subjects. We work a lot across many different therapeutic areas. And Axiom has been around for 20 years now. So we're very excited to talk to you today about how we can use a unified platform to make your clinical trials more efficient. So just some of the characteristics we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about characteristics of a truly unified platform, how that can benefit different stakeholders, and then different manual tasks that we can move to more of an automated process based off of using a unified platform. So starting with what makes up a unified platform. So a unified platform is really going to enable you to be able to collaborate and enhance your study results and how you run a trial through real-time actionable data. So having one platform where we're able to perform all of the different components of our trial. So oftentimes when we think about the systems that we're using in a study, you might end up with multiple different vendors, multiple different platforms. So whether that's an EDC platform, a separate ePro provider, having your central lab data house somewhere, and having all of your IWRS, RTSM randomization information. So having no way to basically access all of that centralized data until we're getting to either the biostats portion or if we're doing any sorts of integration. So this is how most clinical trials are operating with data in separate systems. So what we like to think about when we think about a truly unified system is taking all of those separate systems and moving them into one combined platform. So one platform that has the EDC components that can do your randomization and inventory tracking, that has all of the ePro tools that you would need for patient questionnaires, patient e-diaries, being able to combine that central lab data and have it directly input. So it's taking all of those independent, separate systems and combining them to one system. Now, what's important is to understand an integration versus a truly unified system. So a lot of times, you'll talk to a vendor and they'll say, yes, we offer EDC and we have ePro and IWRS, and that all sounds fantastic. But then you start talking to them and then you realize actually they have a partner that they work on with for ePro or IWRS or have this separate tool. And what that ends up causing is having to have a whole bunch of data integrations to bring that study together to make it seem like you have a unified system. So in order to get that kind of front end look of having all of that data housed in one location, you actually are bolting on different systems together, doing that integration. Oftentimes you have to pay for those integrations. And also there's a little bit of inherent risk when we combine those systems as well, because we have data flowing between different platforms, whether that's through an API or other connection. So it's kind of all of those different components that are almost coming together, but not quite, that can actually cause a little bit more risk. When we think about a truly unified system, that means that the system is actually built on one cohesive platform. So it's one piece of software where EDC is there, RTSM tools are there, central lab is there. It's not taking those different modules and combining them. It's actually just all part of one seamless piece of technology to run your trial. So this is really going to help benefit in how we access that information. It's more cost efficient, which we'll come to in a little while, but it's more cost efficient because you're not paying for those individual integrations, and there's a little bit less risk because you don't have that data moving and flowing between different systems. So for the purpose of today, we're going to focus on truly unified systems, so a one-stop shop eClinical suite platform that's able to provide all of these different components to run your clinical trial. So when we think about that unified platform, we're talking about having the ability to have single sign-on, centralized data, um, very, very flexible configuration for stakeholders. So since it is one piece of technology, having a lot of adaptability and flexibility to really tailor a study configuration to how your study is going to run. Central access rather to reporting and dashboards, and then really efficient training and support and materials. So we're going to take a lot of maybe smaller steps, or maybe in a traditional system, you would tell your site to log into EDC to create their patient, and then log into this system and enter their demographics information to randomize the patient. Kind of taking all of those separate pieces, decreasing our double data entry, and having more efficient processes in general for the site. So with all that in mind, why wouldn't you use a unified platform? It's going to make everything a lot easier just in terms of how we're actually flowing through, collecting that data, having our different workflows in place for all of our team members. So as we move through some of our different examples, we're going to speak to some of the processes that become more efficient as we use a unified platform. But first, I just want to touch on a little bit of the benefits to each of our different stakeholders. So oftentimes when we are in a study and we're designing a study as a sponsor team, we sometimes forget to think about all of the different components that are coming together and what all of those needs might be. So I think in general, it's easy for a sponsor to remember that they'll need access to reports and data. It's easy to know that the sites are obviously going to need to enter data, perform randomization, any other activities we're asking them to do, and then the monitors are going to have to review that information. So I think those are some really, really simple stakeholders rather, that we usually remember. But sometimes we forget about our other key users. So whether that might be other vendors, so if we have a different vendor for labs, if we have a different vendor for data management, if we have a different safety component and safety users. So thinking about other teams that are all going to use this platform, or how we can make it easy for them as well. Sometimes we forget about our inventory needs. Of course, we know that we need inventory for our trial, and it needs to flow as easily as possible. But what does the depot user actually need to do? What do the pharmacies actually need to show and demonstrate to us in order for me at the sponsor level to have that information available? And then also when we think about subjects, if we are using an ePro component, thinking about our subject population, do we need to consider just the subjects, or do we also need to consider any caregivers or other family members or friends who are going to be supporting that subject? So for example, if we're asking for a diary, but the patient is really, really ill, maybe they're in an oncology trial, maybe that means that we actually need to have their caregiver support and enter that information for them. Or if we're working on a study with adolescents, do we need to add in any additional controls for their caregivers for an ePro platform? So just kind of thinking about all of those different stakeholders. By using a unified system, we're able to take all of those individual components and pieces, and since it's one seamless workflow, we're able to more clearly identify at which points those other vendors or team members need to come in and do their activities. So we're able to think about it in a more streamlined process and make it hopefully easier for each of the team members involved. So as we move forward, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can take some manual tasks that are frequently happening in projects and moving them to more of an automation. So we're going to touch on site startup, screening, enrollment, and dosing tasks, safety and medical review, and then getting your overall study metrics. So in terms of site startup, oftentimes this is either done in an Excel document for some studies. It might be done in a separate CTMS platform, but basically being able to track the activity from the point of considering a site for our project all the way through contract completion. That should include all of the milestone planning and forecasting, tracking and collecting all key site information, such as key dates, documents, approval statuses, use that, and then as part of a unified platform, we're able to do a few things. So first, we can take all of those key documents, and first of all, we want to move them directly into our eTMF module. So as soon as they're approved, we want them moved over, filed away, ready for whatever QC steps are going to be applicable for our project. We also want to use the site startup process to activate shipments of IP maybe, if we need to activate sites for enrollment, if we need to set enrollment caps on a per study basis or per site basis rather. We want to use as many of these steps that were occurring naturally in what we need to record to activate and trigger our next thing. So if I say, yes, this site is active, okay, that should raise the first inventory request. We shouldn't need a separate step or process to send an email to the depot to say, okay, you can start sending inventory to site 2 now, they're ready to go. We want all of those steps to happen more automated, a lot less room for error that way, just to keep everything streamlined. Another place where a truly unified platform comes into play is when we think about how we ask sites to screen, enroll, and dose patients. So for a lot of studies, this can end up being very complex with a lot of different steps. So whether that is having to ask this subject to start a washout period, maybe there's a run-in period where they're taking a test IP, if we have to take any compliance information from their run-in visit and period rather, and then the actual randomization process. So it can be a lot of different steps for the site, and we want to keep the sites happy. We want to make it as easy as possible for them so that overall we're meeting our needs for how we randomize, enroll, and dose subjects. So using a platform like Fusion, which is our in-house eClinical suite, you're able to randomize dynamically, set cohort activation, set dose escalation and selection requirements to manage that enrollment at the study or site or subject level to make sure that all of that's happening in real time. You're able to see all of that information reflected immediately in your reports. You don't need to wait for it to talk to the EDC to get the patient information. It's all in one place. We're not asking the sites to log in, create their subject, establish a subject number, enter their demographics in EDC, then take that subject number and that demographic information and retype it in system number 2. We don't want that. No one likes reconciling. We want to make sure that that is going to be as simple as possible. So we're going to use the different tools to make sure it's tailored to our project, and using all of the different reports and dashboards that are going to be available to us to help make this process more streamlined. I'm going to pass it. Oh, and so just in terms of screening, enrollment, dosing, so we're taking that cohort activation, for example, we can set up if there's pre-screening requirements, go through that screening process, and then since it's all in one place, maybe there's an adjudication review process. Maybe the medical monitor needs to review all of the documents of that patient before they can be enrolled. We can record that approval and then randomize the subject and capture dosing all in one place. Once dosing is captured, obviously that's impacting our IP requirements. So if there's any resupply of inventory that needs to be sent to the site, that can all be activated automatically to help streamline the process and the manual work that's going into it. With that, I will pass it over to Maliha, who's going to talk a little bit about how data review can be streamlined.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. So having all your data in one place as part of a unified platform can, for instance, really help with safety and medical review and really facilitate without further delay. For example, the adverse event data and central clinical data for chemistry profile can be centralized into a single patient profile and provide real-time reports without needing to send a request to biostats or a request elsewhere for further analysis. And so working with a unified platform will also facilitate overall study management and it'll really help identify risk and make strategic decisions that can impact overall study conduct. So with the data in one place, you can develop dashboards, map out the enrollment tracking, monitor the number of safety adverse events reported during the trial, and visualize site statuses and the number of open, pending, and closed sites. And this really helps bring together all the moving parts and ensure that there's no risk to the overall study. And so just taking a dive into the visibility and risk management. So technology that allows you to have your clinical data in one place should really help you to know more about your data and know it sooner and act faster to make better solutions for your overall trial. And you can do so with a centralized platform that houses study details and clinical data should be easily accessible, so just in 2 clicks. It should be able to provide you with real-time data knowledge, the trial progress, provide visibility in identifying data trends, as well as understanding where there's stale data in your clinical trial, and most importantly, provide you with overall study control. And with that in mind, if the study and clinical data is accessible, they should also be available in real time when needed. So your data outputs and formats should support the needs in relation to managing the project, clinical listing review, reports that identify data trends, study risk reporting, and allow you to extrapolate raw data sets without delay for biostatistical analysis. So your data output format should include, for example, Excel, SAS, PDF, and on-screen displays. So keeping in mind risk management and mitigation, complete transparency into the data is key to ensure we can act sooner and faster to provide solutions. A unified platform should allow the end user to monitor study risk through key notifications associated with site management, study management, and of course, your clinical management. We also want to ensure that we are notified of key data critical variables and ensure that we can reduce the risk of stale data impacting study endpoints. And because data is in one place, a unified platform provides a holistic approach to the data review and prevents working in silos and waiting for biostats for reporting tools or study analysis. Looking at the data entry and review workflow, once data is entered into the CRF, data integrity is maintained throughout the course of the study, including the operational phase. And this also takes into consideration continuous data review, vendor management, visualizations, and real-time reports, and provides a seamless workflow from initial data entry through STV prior to milestones and database lock.
Thanks, Maliha. So just in kind of how Axiom approaches this, so we have our own fully unified eClinical suite, Fusion. So it provides all of the different tools that you would need to run a trial. So it's the EDC tools, the data management, the RTSM tools, CTMS, and ePro solutions to make sure that overall we're able to manage all of that information in one place. So it really becomes your connected hub for all study data, and that's really what a truly unified platform should be doing for you. So on screen here, I just have a list of all of the different components for Fusion. So since Fusion is a modular platform, we can turn different modules on and off per study based off of study need. So for example, if your study does not require ePro tools, then we wouldn't turn those on for your project. So this is just a list here breaking down those categories that I mentioned earlier. If you do have any questions about them, I invite you to visit our website to check out all of the different solutions that we offer here. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at solutions@axiom.cc. And thank you so much for your time today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'm just going to walk us through the questions that have been answered so far. If you have additional questions, please put those into the chat and I'll answer them as time permits. So the first question here is just asking, with outsourcing options with lots of outsourcing options available at highly competitive pricing. What are the fiscal benefits of using a e-clinical platform? So I'm going to touch on two. So we touched on quite a few in the presentation, but I'm just going to highlight two. So the first one is obviously not having to pay for those different systems, which means not having to contract lots of different vendors. So I think we can all agree that managing and contracting vendors can take up a lot of time and effort, not only to get them started, but then also kind of the ongoing management of the trial. When you're working on an eClinical platform, a unified eClinical platform, you don't need to find a separate IWS vendor and an EDC vendor and have 30 million calls every single week. Having that all in one place really streamlines your time, both for contracting and setting up the study, as well as throughout, to just make sure that we're working with one consistent team who understands the full impact and scope of what they're doing and are all working towards one timeline and managing everything from kind of one central place as well on the management side. The other benefit, of course, is since those systems are all in one unified platform, you're not paying for all of those integration costs. So just in terms of fiscal benefits, I would highlight that it's a lot less time and effort on both vendor management and then also on the integrations. The next question here is, what benefits or advantages do unified eClinical platforms provide compared to traditional individual solutions? So again, we touched on this a little bit during the presentation. I think when Maliha was speaking to how easy it makes data review and having all of that data in one place is a huge benefit and advantage. Obviously, there's the fiscal benefits that I just mentioned, but having that holistic view of all of your patient data, being able to access a live report that has, you know, all of their ePro data and their safety data and any clinical assessments that are done. It's just really, really helpful to get that overall picture, especially when you are trying to get your medical monitor to review every profile of every subject in the study. It's nice to be able to have all of that information in one place and not need to work on getting access to all of the data from different sources, waiting for biostats to combine everything. It just makes it a lot easier to look at that patient view. The next question here is, how can small and medium-sized life sciences organizations benefit from utilizing a unified eClinical platform? So our target audience, the companies that we work with are mostly small to medium-sized companies, and I think the biggest platform that they experience is that you can really save a lot of time when you're using an eClinical solution. So since often our teams are smaller on the ClinOps side or the data management side when we're working at a small to medium-sized company, being able to, pull a report that, someone else would have had to manually create with all of your different systems, and just being able to pull that single access report and have dashboards available to you in real time. All of those are going to really, really help your team. And you're going to find that maybe your bandwidth isn't as stretched as you thought it was. And maybe you're going to be able to, I don't know, work regular hours for a little bit, as opposed to some of the longer hours we're used to working. So having everything in one place really, really streamlines that. You get those hours back in meetings every week. So it's really letting technology become that extra resource for you instead of having to hire kind of additional people resources. The next question here is just considering the changes in regulatory guidances due to COVID-19 and the increased prevalence of virtual or hybrid trials, how does a unified eClinical platform better support the new requirements? So just on the COVID and virtual trial side, or decentralized trials, having a unified platform really puts that data all in one place. And since the unified platform that you're using should have lots of modules, it should be pretty easy to kind of pivot and add in or remove things as our studies change. So for example, last year, when we had to move to having more remote visits and having remote monitoring and having patients doing assessments at home sometimes, or switching to using home healthcare nurses, having a unified eClinical suite that has lots of modular options that you can add to a project really streamlined that for a lot of our clients. So for example, when we did make that switch, instead of, having set patients come in to be consented and having a paper process, we switched to using e-consent for the home health nurses who ended up going to visit our patients instead of bringing them into the sites. We were able to use our eSource tools to let the nurses capture that information directly. So direct data entry as opposed to, recording that on paper, sending it to the site, waiting for the site to data enter it. So having kind of that modular platform, having that access to all of the different pieces helps with remote monitoring. So it's really beneficial to have everything as digital as possible, of course, in the last year, and probably will be just as important moving forward. But being able to quickly pivot and add or remove functionality as you need it, as opposed to saying, okay, well, now that we're using a home health nurse, we want to provide them an eSource tool. So now I need to go source an eSource tool. And then the last question here is, how long does it typically take users to be trained? So that depends on the complexity of the study. So for if you were using kind of just the EDC and kind of basics, it may take anywhere from 60 minutes for a coordinator and maybe 30 minutes for a monitor or sponsor. Of course, if we have lots of requirements, maybe we have to teach the sites how to teach their patients how to use the e-diary, how to do quality of life questionnaires at the sites with the patients on tablets, how to randomize their patients and dispense inventory. So as we add additional functionality, it may take, somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes for a coordinator, still about 30, 35 minutes for a sponsor. And then for a monitor, we want to make sure they know everything that a coordinator can do, plus the extra monitoring pieces. So usually about 90 minutes as well. Are there any other questions? If there are, please enter them into the chat. But otherwise, thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon, and I hope you have a great rest of your time here.